We've come from the civil rights movement that learned that civil rights are not adequate or complete without economic opportunity. We've come from a peace movement that came to understand that there never can be a stable peace as long as there are extraordinary disparities of wealth and economic opportunity. We've come from an environmental movement that learned our efforts to preserve the natural environment will not succeed on a broad scale unless we address legitimate concerns regarding development. CDFIs were born from a group of visionaries with an audacious idea. They believed capitalism can work for everyone when people are put before profit.
What bound us together as a collective was the shared anger each one of us had about the places either we were from or where we were living and the injustice that we saw there, and that the opportunity that was denied people who could have been our grandparents or our sisters or our brothers, where organizing money and investing it could help them revitalize their communities.
I first ran into CDFIs or their predecessors, in my case, community development loan funds, in 1988, right before Thanksgiving, when a friend invited my wife and me over to the house of their friend in Philadelphia, and that friend happened to be Martin Paul Trimble. And Martin started talking about these community development loan funds and how they brought communities together and how they organized capital from nuns and other faith-based investors and from foundations and all the amazing work they were doing. And I thought either he was crazy or he was a prophet. And turned out he was a prophet.
What was good about our early energy was people were always looking a little forward. How do we break in to the major flows of capital, to the major flows of federal subsidy, to do the work that the country needs to build this economy in rural and urban areas? So great energy in the early days. And I think the truth is we've never lost it.
The energy of the industry is what opened my eyes to the possibilities. People who were deeply committed, people who were smart as hell, because at the end of the day, we're talking about people who are in finance. As an urban planner, I am not in finance. And so my initial anchoring certainly was not coming to it as interest in the financial industry. It was, frankly, looking at avenues for impact.
For more than 40 years, CDFIs have been stewards of responsible capital. It has been an extraordinary journey. Now, here we are. History has brought us to this decisive moment. Where do we go now?
There are 1,300 places out of 4,300 places in this country with more than 10,000 people who are that are CDFI deserts. So there's a significant amount of this country that doesn't have access to CDFIs anywhere close to what it needs, which is not to say the places that have access to CDFIs have all they need. They don't. But I think that's a driving strategic factor for the CDFI industry moving forth. And I hope that folks, in a lot of ways, and some people are doing this, will find new ways to expand expand service across geographies.
We've transformed this field because of very strong partnerships with very powerful entities. And I feel like the future is still with partnerships, and that our ability to be the needle-nosed financial first responders who will see a problem and will see the communities who need it need to continue to build on all three of those partnerships. And then I would just add one more thing about the future. I think we have to continue to be the employer of choice. We have to draw the smart, committed, capable people to this field. And I feel so good about that because there's so much good work ahead.
Change isn't made at a loan committee. Almost all the founders came out of some sort of organizing background, and they understood what it meant to work with and support and develop ordinary people in order to make change. So my advice to today's leaders is to honor your mothers and fathers. All of us started in organizing. You need to start in organizing.
We stand today on the history and impact of so many that have come before us, who made sure that we had the right resources, who made sure that organizations were standing at the ready to be a resource in communities. We stand here today on the shoulders of so many. And so Made by History couldn't be more perfect as an honoring of what the past has been for our industry, but also a teeing up, not only at the moment, but for a bright future.
CDFIs are proven. We are made by history. We are made for this moment.
Welcome, everyone. How are you doing today? Good. Usually the lights are bright, so I can't see you, so you don't get nervous, but damn it, I can see all of you. And you look wonderful, by the way. Hey, a big round of applause for Calvin Holmes and getting us warmed up, getting us started. So, welcome to Los Angeles. Welcome to Southern California. I don't think we've been back in, we haven't been here since 2010. And it pains me to say this because I'm from San Diego and a Padre fan, but for you Dodger fans, the last time we were in California, the Giants won their first pennant. So, if the Dodgers win, you can thank OFN for having their conference here. So I'm honored, and you should be excited with the individuals that we have here today on this plenary. We have 3 distinguished individuals, all of them Ned Groundlich Award winners, which OFN gives out only to the very best, to those who have had an impact not only in our industry, but in their community. So we're going to hear from them today. I'm going to ask them some series of questions. We're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to ask them a little bit what has inspired them, what keeps them going. And then hopefully if we have time, which I think we will, we'll ask a little bit about the future because there's current leaders here, but more importantly, there's future leaders here that we all can learn from the folks here on the stage. They have incredible bios. They're all in the information and on the apps that you have, so we're not going to go over that because we want to jump into the questions and to hear from them. So I'm going to start with Michael at the far right of me with the first question. And Professor Swack, 1985, 40 years ago, you were at the first conference when we were called, I think, the National Association of Community Development Loan Funds. You and 64 of your best friends got together in Massachusetts, as Calvin said. Tell us a little bit about the room and the discussions that happened. And you were a founding board member of OFN, but you were also a founding board member of many community development loan funds. So, what was the vision of those loan funds? What were you hoping to impact? And have there been any surprises in that 40 years that you've had that chance to take a look at things?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So first of all, it was a ragtag group, really. I mean, I look out here and everybody, looks great and all that. And I mean, we looked great, but we look great in a different sort of way. And it was at a religious retreat center, so very Spartan. And the irony of that is I didn't at the time, but I now live about 3 miles from that religious retreat center and, drive by it frequently. My wife is sick of my saying, "See that, Jane? That's, that's where the first OFN meeting was." She's like, I know, you've told me 1,000 times. But it was really a group of more identified themselves as social activists. I mean, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone at that first meeting who considered themselves a finance expert. And it was interesting because they considered me a finance expert because I had taken, courses in finance in graduate school and had worked for a small finance consulting firm for a year and a half, which made me like an expert at that point. But people didn't come because they were interested in finance. And as the field has developed, we've needed people with more financial experience and they've come into the field. But in 1985, it was a pretty ragtag group of people who were really social activists as opposed to finance people. And they sought finance people to join. The other thing that was interesting, and it's sort of future looking, at not to get ahead of our schedule, but was the idea that it was really, these institutions were supposed to be a place that local people could also invest their money. Yeah, there were credit unions already, and the credit unions are a very important part of the community development finance movement, and I hope there are credit unions here today as well.
Right.
But they were like Bill, right? But they were primarily interested in consumer finance. So one of the initial goals, the Institute for Community Economics, which opened this, for example, was interested in community land trusts, a different way of land ownership and home ownership. And so the idea was, how do we finance projects, and how do we give people in their own communities an opportunity to invest in their projects? What we see today is an increasing concentration of our investment comes from the government and from banks. In the early stages, that was a warning sign. It was like, we have to be careful that we don't get too dependent on government. And in fact, one of the interesting things that's really talked about is there was opposition among community development, they weren't called CDFIs yet, to the idea of a government program supporting community development financial institutions, because the fear, and Chuck Mathai had this, is once the government ran the program, it would lose its mission status and everybody would adhere to the regulations and requirements of the government.
So, thank you, Michael. So, Sister Corinne. So, 12 years at Catholic school, I was really nervous to talk to Sister Corinne. It says here, and they wrote it on paper, so it must be true, that you were the godmother of CDFIs. But we're in Los Angeles. Spanish is the first language in Los Angeles. So, we're going to call you La Madrina of CDFIs for today while you're in Los Angeles.
Gracias.
Yes.
Gracias.
So you've been a key and inspirational leader in investment in CDFIs from the 70s. So tell us a little bit about why you invested in these ragtag organizations that Michael was talking about. And as Calvin said, we took your retirement money, or you invested your retirement money with these organizations. What was the thought process, and what kind of inspired you and the other sisters to take that leap of faith?
Just so people know, too, she was with the same ragtag organization that I was with.
So it was you two and 63 others.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's true we invested our retirement money, and it's also true that they paid it back. And I want to thank everybody for that, because right now I'm retired. And I'm living on that money. So, but the inspiration really was, we were one of the first investors in South Shore Bank, and we were just beginning to save for our retirement, but we were very strong in terms of our commitment to social justice. So we had sisters among us who were like, we can't just save money for ourselves. What about our commitment to social justice? What about our commitment to the poor? Wait a minute, there's got to be a way to do something together with these two values that we hold. And luckily, that's when South Shore came into view, and so we invested in South Shore. And then and then credit unions, and then as the CDFIs developed, we included them in our investments, because we wanted to say, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We make statements about social justice, about diversity, about equity. We want our money to say the same thing. So that's why we did it in the beginning, because we wanted to be congruent between what we said our values were and how we used our money. And granted, it wasn't all our money, but I have to admit, when we'd lend to a group, I'd say, this is my retirement money. I always felt like a little Catholic guilt helped.
That Catholic guilt works extremely well, trust me. Thank you for that. So Bill, you've had a legendary career starting out at one of our most recognized CDFIs at Self-Help. But then you went on to develop and create Hope Enterprises, Hope Credit Union in the Deep South. Tell us a little bit about your experience, not only with Self-Help and how that maybe inspired and motivated you, but about the incredible work you've done in the Mississippi Delta and the Deep South.
Thanks, Robert. I've got to start first by just looking, as I look at this room, as amazing as those ragtag, I think you called them, folks were back in 1985, it looked a lot different than this room. This room, and I just want to congratulate this organization, this movement, on looking more like the country, looking more like the people we serve. It is much, much more anchored in those we serve, and that's really important to me. When I was at Self-Help, I come up as an organizer, as Martin said. Somebody introduced me once as a financier. I kind of laughed. I said, no, I'm a community organizer, and I went to Self-Help after I had gotten waitlisted for law school. I was waiting, and it was this organization, Center for Community Self-Help, that was trying to help people who were losing their jobs in the mid-'80s because companies were closing and moving outside, south of the border, overseas, not because the businesses weren't viable, but because they could get cheaper labor. They can be more profitable, and they left these companies that were fine high and dry. And so the workers came together, and we helped them develop business plans, and we went to banks to get financing. These blue-collar people of color, women, not traditional business owners, nothing for you. And so we decided to organize our own credit union, our own bank. You probably heard the story of a bake sale, $77. The workers got together, and that was the first deposit in Self-Help. And Self-Help is now across the country. It's here in California. It's in Florida. It is an incredible organization. And before we knew it, we had more deposits than we had worker-owned businesses. So we started doing rural businesses owned by people of color in low-income communities, and eventually expanded into housing after the financial crisis, created a secondary market that just has helped millions of people become homeowners and has set a model for the rest of the country. And I really think that really inspired me and showed me what is possible when people bring their work together, bring their resources together, and advocate on behalf of the people we serve, because it is really, that is really what it's all about. It's about the people. I don't think we are special because of our big brains or our big balance sheets. It's because we anchor our work in those communities and give them what people in more affluent places take for granted. They can do anything that anyone else can do when they have the tools, and we provide them with the tools. And I've seen that happen over and over again. I left Self-Help and went to the North Carolina Rural Center, and we started a micro business loan fund. I think Phil Black is here. Phil worked with me there, and we grew the largest micro business program in the country, and we were doing great, helping entrepreneurs who, again, couldn't go into a traditional bank and get financing, but they needed money to help support their families and to cobble enough money together to make ends meet. And I was doing that when a friend called me and was looking to start an organization in the Mississippi Delta, place just synonymous with poverty and racial challenges. And we had $1.5 million, and we said we were going to transform the economy of the Delta. We were pretty audacious. Obviously, that wasn't. We were a bit naive also. $1.5 million wouldn't go so far, but we saw that when we provide people with the tools, they could succeed. They ran their businesses and they started to grow. We just didn't have enough capital, and so we kept calling people together. We started a credit union, at a church to respond to predatory lending in Jackson. And over the years, we have continued to stay busy. We have seen that credit union at different points be one of the fastest growing credit unions in the country. because we saw when banks leave, people don't all of a sudden stop needing banking services. Unfortunately, predators come in and fill the gaps. And so we've been able to grow and we've expanded beyond the Delta. We're now in Memphis, we're in Alabama, we're in Tennessee, we're in Louisiana, and I feel like we're just getting started.
Thank you for that. So, we heard that Bill started as an organizer. Martin started as an organizer, you heard it. I started as an organizer. Any other starting as organizers out there? Give yourself a round of applause. So I'm going to throw this out, and I'm hoping all of our panelists can answer this question, but I think as Bill said, it's about the people, why we do a lot of the work that we do. And a lot of us, particularly if we're asking for funding or we go talk to Auntie Maxine when we're in our office in DC, it's about the stories. It's the stories of the people that we work with and inspire us. So I'm wondering if each of you can share a story that really solidified that, yeah, I know this is the right thing that I'm doing, and it can be more than one story, but this moment inspires me and gives me the confidence to move forward. So, any of you? Yeah. Michael?
So we were told we were going to be asked for a story, and last night I was thinking about the many, many stories I could tell. There are a lot of good ones, When I almost got arrested for securities fraud, that's a good story, but I'm not going to tell that one. The story that really struck me, though, was so I've been associated with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. Where are you guys? For 41 years now. And the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund has had an amazing program all of those years where it served people who live in manufactured housing parks, and the loan fund helps them buy their parks. It's a strange quirk where the land is owned by someone else. They lease the land, but they own their own homes. So the loan fund has had a program where they help residents form a cooperative and buy the land underneath it and own the land cooperatively so they can't be evicted from their homes. They've been running the program for about 5 years, and one of the things we organized, still do, but in the early days, was a visit to the parks to see and talk to the residents, and we'd go in a little meeting room and they would talk about what the process was like. And after the meeting, I was walking back with a woman who lived in the park, and I just said to her, just the two of us there, I said, so how do you like living here? And she said, well, son, let me tell you a story. This was like 35 years ago, so she could say that then. She said, let me tell you a story. The story is, when I was born, and I think this is going to be a long story, right? When I was born, my father made all the rules. He told me what we had to do, and he was very strict, and our house was run with a strong fist by my father. And then I went to school, and the teacher made all the rules, and the teachers were strict, and I had to follow what they said. And I went to church on Sunday, and the minister made all the rules, and I had to behave in a certain way. Then I got married. My husband made all the rules, and I didn't have a say in anything in my life. And I went to work, and my boss made all the rules. And she said, this is like the theme of my life. Everybody else made the rules. And then I became part of the co-op. And for the first time in my life, this woman was like, in her 60s, maybe her 70s, she said, for the first time in my life, I got a part in making the rules. And I thought to myself, that is like one of the best evaluate. Forget all the numbers you crunch and all that. Like, one of the best things is to hear that here's someone's life is different in her own words because she finally gets to decide something about her own life. And I thought that's an incredibly powerful story about what a community development financial institution can do in terms of helping people feel that they're actually controlled, they have some stability, they can make decisions, that their life belongs to them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty amazing to hear from her.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Sister Corinne or Bill?
Okay, I'm going to tell you one that I'm thinking about because it was just very interesting. There was, this is in San Francisco, and there were a group of artists. Now, you know how much money artists make, right? So there were a group of artists, and they were in this house, and the landlord died, and the children did not want to be in the business of renting a house, so they wanted to sell it. So luckily, there was a land trust in San Francisco, and the people reached out to the land trust, and the land trust was like, okay, we'll try to help you. Well, the land trust was new, and it didn't have a lot of money. So they reached out to me. So we talked to them, how are you going to pay it back, blah, blah, blah. We ended up making the loan. Now, here's the fun part of the story. I took a bunch of sisters to go meet the artists and sit in their house and share community. And you know what we talked about? So how do you decide who does the dishes? How do you decide who cleans the kitchen? How do you decide all those decisions about living in community? That's what we focused on. It was just so wonderful to see that we had much more in common than we lent you the money for that house. We had living in community in common.
Thank you. Bill?
There's just so many people, and every individual loan, every individual account that we open, it just seems there's a story behind it. Some of you may have heard me talk about when we took over the branch of when the largest bank in the region closed several branches across the South. One of the branches was in a town called Bynum, Mississippi. It's what it sounds like, itty bitty. And if we had every deposit in Bynum, we have about $1.25 million. And we've got most of those deposits, but it's hardly enough to do the kind of investment, support the homes, the businesses, the community infrastructure. But we're there, and because those people need access to the same things we all need. There was one of the first accounts that we opened was a woman who was on her 100th birthday, had gotten a check, and she made, for the first time in her life, a deposit in our credit union. The first time she ever felt respected, was treated with enough dignity to feel like she could participate in the banking system, something that so many people take for granted. And so I think about her and what a difference just that transaction made for her and for her family, who saw what that meant to her and who hopefully will follow her path and know that the financial system is there for them as well. But I also want to talk about how important, beyond the transactions, beyond the loans, what we do as CDFIs in bringing the voices of those people we serve into the rooms where people are deciding policy, how resources are allocated. We touch over 100,000 people on a regular basis, and we're able to take their data and go into the halls of influence and jump on the table and say, this is what our communities deserve, this is what they need. And I think about that where it really hit home, and this is often the case, CDFIs are at our most impactful during times of crises. Our families have tornadoes, economic disasters, natural disasters, man-made most of the time, on a regular basis, but in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. And my colleagues were some of the first people down there. I remember Phil Ide spent nights in his car, sleeping on the ground, trying to figure out what we could do to be helpful. And we ended up building some of the first homes that were built after the hurricane on the Mississippi coast. And we wrote the low income, the governor of Mississippi developed a hurricane recovery plan. There was no plan for affordable housing. And so we went to the head of the commission, and he said, well, write it. So we wrote it, and it got accepted by the governor, and then sat on the shelf. Fast forward, the business community was importing workers from Haiti on temporary visas. And they said, look, we've got to have workforce housing. So he took our plan off the shelf, and we pulled together nonprofit organizations. We work with NeighborWorks, we work with CDCs, and they got trained to do counseling, because as often is the case during these crises, there are billions of dollars that go into these communities, and the people who are at the front of the line aren't the people who need it most. And often there are predators trying to extract money from those people who are not as financially experienced. Mm-hmm. And so we developed a counseling and a program where we ended up counseling 10,000 households and helped them get $600 million to rebuild their homes after Hurricane Katrina. Wow. And so, and for me, yes, it's financing, but that's organizing. That's rolling up your sleeves and doing what's needed to help our communities get what they deserve.
Yeah, thank you. So you were all vulnerable and you shared some stories, so we're still in this vulnerable, safe space. So we had some good stories. Any regrets in regards to, I wish we had done this differently, because industry may have been here, or my organization may have been here if I had done this differently? Anything you wish you'd have changed, looking back in your all 40-year history?
I don't know if this is a change, and this may get to your last question, and if it does, then I'll cede my time for that. But in my mind, there's a question of, what do you worry about after 40 years? And what I worry about is the fact that the field has become highly bifurcated. That is, there are 1,500 of us, but there's a relatively small number of large, fairly sophisticated CDFIs. And those CDFIs have figured out, in many ways, how to access larger pools of money. They're the handful that actually belong to the Federal Home Loan Bank and draw down money. They're the ones that have been rated by Standard & Poor's. But the large number of the 1,500 CDFIs are relatively small and really scuffle. I mean, we know, because we've looked at these data, to raise their operating funds each year. And one of the issues I think we need to address as a field is how do we become less bifurcated? How do we make it so that these smaller CDFIs have access to those funds? There's no reason why the Federal Home Loan Bank, which allows membership, should have such strict criteria. I mean, one of the things I suggested, why doesn't Treasury just guarantee the collateral for every CDFI? I mean, we're looking at an amazing track record. That is, if you look at small versus large CDFIs, they still perform at the same level in terms of repayments of loans and every measure you would make to determine whether, how risky they are, and that they still face all this. I'd like to see us come together more as a field to look at how do we raise the platform for those that really struggle, from data, whether we're talking about the native CDFIs, rural CDFIs, some of the smaller ones that serve particular communities. We need to better collaborate with the larger institutions and capital providers to figure out how everybody benefits more than they do. And so that's, in some ways a regret, but also, it's a question of what do we need to do to build the field still? We've proven a lot in 40 years, and we've proven just about everyone wrong. And yet we still actually are faced with bias, where there's a perceived risk that's far greater than the actual risk, any way you would measure it, using any sort of data. We still have to get beyond that.
Yeah. Michael, I appreciate that, because that does tee us up, as we have 6.5 minutes left, in terms of the future, right? So we've talked a little bit about the past. Michael took us to 1985. We didn't have to wear shoulder pads or frizz up our hair. But we've got great knowledge here. What is, we have CDFI leaders, more importantly, we have future leaders here. The individuals that are going to drive, hopefully, the next 40 years as you've been part of the last 40 years. What advice from your journey would you give to the industry at this point? Michael, I loved your answer because you teed it up in terms of this bifurcation. How do we get over that hump? But what are some other things based on the lessons that all three of you have learned over the last 40 plus years?
Well, I don't know that it's a lesson I've learned, but I just attended a meeting of young people who are very concerned about how they use their money. And they're in good jobs, and they might have money from their families or something. But they don't know about CDFIs. They don't know about community investing. And they're looking for something. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, somehow we need to figure out how to reach these young people who want to do something different than with their money, and they don't know about you. They don't realize that you exist. And yet they have that desire. And so they're thinking they have to create a fund so they can invest. And of course, I'm saying to them, wait a minute. So there's something about how we connect with them, because of course, they're on their phones and social media, etc. Somehow we have to find a way to connect with them because they're out there and they're in tune with us, but they don't know about us.
Bill, what you saying?
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. I think one is, and again, I talked about how I feel about the importance of advocating for our communities, bringing their voices into the rooms that are deciding policies that will affect not just us, but our children, whether or not we have a planet to live in, an air to breathe. And I think it's really naive to think that any of us can do this work by ourselves. It builds on your point about working together, and I don't think it's just with banks and people outside. I think it's with each other. I think collectively we represent the diversity of this country. People who sit in an office. Chairman Waters didn't come here because she didn't recognize the power of this industry, of the work that we do. Brian Moynihan didn't sit on the stage last year, the head CEO of Bank of America, because he didn't recognize the significance of the work that we do. And I think we have to own that, and we have to leverage that. We have to lean in, and as the kid, as my grandson says, don't be scared. We got to own our power, and our power is in the people that we serve. 90% of Hope Credit Union members have voted in the last 2 elections. 90%. That's really great. When people own, they go to their town hall, they go to their PTA, they go to their town board, they tell them what's best for their community, but we have so many people telling them now that they don't matter. And so we've got to work with them and help them make sure that we have more owners and empower them to use their voices, and then we have to amplify their voices and take them to people who can make who are making decisions. And it's not just government, it's banks, it's private corporations. We can't sit on the sideline, and I think we need to recognize the power that we have, and where that power is drawn from is from our members, is from the communities that we serve.
Thank you. So we've got just under 2 minutes left, so I'll just go down. Any final words of inspiration, advice to, I don't know if there's 2,000, but the 1,000 folks that are out here visiting with us tonight. Sister?
I think I want to go back to be sure you stay in touch with the people that you're helping. Don't sit at a desk and think you can just do the analysis and that's good enough. If you don't get out and see the people and experience where they are and what they're doing and what they're struggling with, you're missing it. Because I think it makes you better when you're connected with them and you're in the struggle together.
Thank you. Bill?
You know, I work in an area I think is in the belly of the beast. If you look at where slaveholding was concentrated before the Civil War, you see where the worst concentration of housing conditions, education, predatory lending, it is in the same places. It's eerily similar. And so I just think we can't rest on our laurels. We can't rest on the fact that we've done something. We're the largest, probably the largest Black and women-owned financial institution in the country, but we're tiny. We're tiny compared to the need. And so we got to keep pushing. We got to keep fighting for our communities because, you know, again, things, we're seeing a lot of challenges that I think we all thought had been addressed. We're fighting fights that were fought in the 60s, were fought in the 70s that led to the creation of this industry, and we cannot sit on our thumbs and assume that just because we got some great photo ops and we've got, I've met with President Bush, with President Obama, with President Clinton came to one of our plants. I didn't meet the last president before this one, but President Biden, Vice President Harris came to our community and talked to our members, and that's great. And they came because they know the power of the work we do and the importance of the communities that we serve. And so let's just roll up our sleeves and let's finish the fight. Let's finish the job.
Yeah.
I'll make this.
I know we're out of time, but Michael?
Yeah, I'll make this really fast, which is just to look forward to a really huge challenge we face in this room, which is all the funds we're getting through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, where CDFIs are the major intermediaries. And I want to get back to your point, Corinne, which is how important it is to engage the community in that. If we're going to deploy $20 billion through CDFIs, we need to collaborate, we need to engage the community. This is a big challenge in front of us right now. We need to take advantage of it.
So please join me in thanking our committee.